to give a note of thanks to recognize our gifts of a particular day. And we'll do that this morning. Join with me in this children's prayer. I climb a hill so I can see what you created here for me. The birds that sing at morning light, the grass so green, the flowers bright, the trees that tower high above. I see the many signs of love that you have made for me today. I only want to stop and say, thank you, Lord God. And this morning I'm particularly thankful for good friends and support in all of my work here. It's been a wonderful year in Wolseley, and I'm particularly grateful for that. Anybody else, feel free to shout out what your greatest thankful is for today.
When I look at the Thanksgiving display, I see a beautiful tomato plant with red cherry tomatoes, and I think of how fortunate and how thankful I am for all the good eating that we have. I hope that others have the same thing.
Thank you, Irvin. The display, the gnomes did come in and make a Thanksgiving display, and it's beautiful. And I noticed those tomatoes, and they're on the plant, and I'm so tempted to grab them. Do we have another? A thankful.
I think the colors this fall are absolutely beautiful. We haven't really had a killing frost yet, and there's reds and golds, and it's just lovely this fall.
Beautiful colors, yeah. Because we haven't had a real killing frost, the leaves are just so glorious. Anybody else? As we go through the service today, we might identify some other expressions of gratitude, and maybe toward the end of the service we'll have another opportunity to make that statement. The readings this morning, the scriptures this morning, in spite of what I said earlier on the Facebook page, I have chosen Deuteronomy chapter 8, verses 7 to 9. For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land with brooks, streams, and deep springs gushing out into the valleys and hills, a land with wheat and barley, vines and fig trees, pomegranates, olive oil, and honey, a land where bread will not be scarce, and you will lack nothing, a land where the rocks are iron, and you can dig copper out of the hills. The promised land. And a gospel reading this morning from Luke chapter 17, verses 11 to 19. This is where Jesus heals 10 men with leprosy. Now, on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and called out in a loud voice, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us. When he saw them, he said, Go, show yourselves to the priests. And they went, and they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back, praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the others? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner? Then he said to him, Rise and go. Your faith has made you well. I find that really interesting on several different levels. The first off is that this was a Samaritan, a foreigner, a nobody, if it were somebody not respected, and that was the person that came back to thank Jesus. That's at one level. There's that anomaly. The second anomaly is that Jesus could recognize him immediately as a foreigner, as a Samaritan. So there was obviously some physical differences. And the third thing that strikes me about that particular passage is that isn't that just the way it is? Out of every 10 people who have a blessing, one will identify it and thank God for it. And that's pretty much the average, isn't it, when you think about it? My meditation this morning, I entitled Learning to be Grateful, and it is a learning process. When I was a child, and my kids get sick of hearing this, when I was a kid, when I was your age, when I was a child, we didn't have a thankful prayer at the end of the day. I did not learn as a child to be grateful for the things that I had. That's just the way it was in my family. We were troubled by many things, and it just didn't happen. My mother was a single parent of 5 children after my father was killed, and it was tough times without much, it was dawn till dusk, and there just wasn't any energy left over for being grateful. Everybody has a story to tell, and sometimes many stories. So this is my story about becoming grateful, recognizing my gratitude. And some of you may have heard it before, but I have to repeat it. It's good for me to tell my story again and again to other people. I need to keep reminding myself of my own story, remembering what it was like way back then, so that I don't have to go there anymore. And I encourage everyone to tell their own story to other people. As I go through my daily life, as I sit with people over coffee down at Tilly's or whatever, people tell me stories about themselves. I got into a really interesting storytelling conversation about school administration a couple of, in the past week or so. Now, so this is my story about learning gratitude. There was a time in my life when I wasn't viewing the world through rose-colored glasses. It was quite the opposite. They were really dark glasses. I was dealing with a lot of bad stuff in the world. I saw a lot of bad stuff around me, and I began to view the whole world as just being made of bad stuff. All I saw was garbage all day long. And that became the whole world, a big pile of garbage. And I knew this was crazy. I knew it intellectually because there has to be some beauty and good somewhere in the world. I just could no longer recognize it. Fortunately for me, at that point in my life, I did have a spiritual advisor. This was a guy that I went to with everything that was troubling me. And so I went to him with this trouble, and we talked about it. And he told me what he always told me about anything. Any problem that I went to him with, he told me exactly the same thing. We talked about the problem, we identified it, and we came up with a statement about the problem. And his advice to me all the time was, pray for it every day for 30 days, and God will give you a taste of what it could be. Just pray for it every day for 30 days. So every day, several times a day, my prayer was, God, help me to see the rose in the garbage heap. There's got to be a flower somewhere. I needed to see some truth and some beauty in order to survive. So several times a day. And slowly in that 30 days, it started to work. There were some days that were pretty good, just average. I could find some beauty, some truth in that day if I looked for it. It was fairly easy. And there were some really good days when I stepped out the door and I was struck by beauty and truth immediately. It was a glorious day. Those were moments to be cherished. And then there were the really, really, really good days. Those fantastic days when I didn't see anything but the garbage all day long. And when I went to bed at night, I said the prayer over and over again. God, help me to see the rose in the garbage heap, asking for help to see that flower. And every day, there was some small touch of beauty or truth that came through. Something, it could be really simple, something like a smile or a wave from across the street, or maybe some kids playing in a park, or maybe a piece of music, or just a sunset, or there was something every day. And if I focused my mind on that piece of beauty in that day and said, thank you for that, in my mind, the garbage became less and less relevant, and the daily dose of beauty took over. That's all it took. 30 days. And it became a habit that's been with me ever since. I was no longer simply reacting to the world as I thought I saw it. I was no longer a victim of what I saw as being a cruel and unjust ugliness in the world. I was free to become an active director of my own story. I decided what I wanted to see. I could choose to see the truth and beauty around me all the time. And that habit began to develop, the habit of looking for truth and beauty rather than the garbage and the filth in life. So today, in these days, we have some darkness of racial and political and economic violence, and things look rather bleak. And it's easy to despair. And in the face of the fear that we have of a second wave of the pandemic, it might be easy to give up. God, help me to see the rose in the garbage heap. God, help me to see the truth and beauty that is around me, and to be grateful for that. It's there if I look for it. And I learn to be grateful for that touch of beauty. Amen. I encourage us all to search for beauty and truth every day. Our hymn is Voices United 236, Now Thank We All Our God. And as usual in this time of pandemic,